Welcome to our journey of transformation. We are in the fifth stage of our journey, and we've been talking about how to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, because if we love God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, then we'll want to love as He loves, which means we'll have to learn how to love our neighbors as ourselves. And so we began our studies considering the parables, the conversations, and the principles of Jesus, in which He teaches us to have this kind of unconditional love for our neighbors. And now we're going to take a look at the conversation that Jesus had with the Samaritan woman. And you can turn and read together from John chapter 4, beginning with verse 4. And we'll read down to verse 30. This is where John writes, saying, "Now he had gone through Samaria, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, 'Will you give me a drink?' His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, 'You are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?' For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you have said you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and now has come, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I, the one speaking to you, I am he." Just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a Samaritan woman. But no one asked him, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" Then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to town and said to the people, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" And they came out of the town and made their way toward him. Let's think about this conversation, and especially how Jesus treats this woman, and what we can learn about the practice of love. You remember, of course, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Jesus taught that our neighbors are not necessarily those who live near us or come from our circle of acquaintances, but in fact, motivated by love, we decide who our neighbors are by crossing the distance separating us from them and serving or caring for them. Where they are from or where they live does not matter. We create relationships by caring for anyone whose needs we can supply. And we become neighbors by our decision to love. Without a doubt, coming close to someone who is very different from us can be a challenge. We form preconceived ideas, prejudices, and even fears that make the distance between us difficult to cross. But caring for people we would not normally consider as neighbors, or those we may not necessarily want to consider as neighbors, provides us opportunities to genuinely grow in love. Otherwise, we remain stagnant, locked in our small circle of friends. We convince ourselves that we are loving because we care for our friends, but this is not the level of love that the Samaritan practiced for his neighbor. When Jesus told the parable of the Good Samaritan, he chose the main character of the story as a Samaritan for good reason. He was speaking with an expert in the law of Moses, who was, of course, a Jew. Those who shared the mentality of this man would have also been listening to that conversation. The Jews practiced open prejudices against the Samaritans that had first formed more than 600 years before Jesus' coming. This long-standing cultural and religious hostility was mutual, deeply rooted in the minds of both groups. Geographically, the province of Samaria was situated between the provinces of Galilee in the north and Judea in the south. Both Galilee and Judea had large Jewish populations. Travel between Galilee and Judea required Jews to pass through Samaria, unless they wanted to go a long distance out of their way to avoid Samaria completely. So it was a radical decision Jesus made to create the hero of the parable as a Samaritan who cared for his neighbor, the injured Jew. He wanted his audience to confront and challenge their ideas about the Samaritans. But we know that overcoming walls of fear and prejudice is more than just a mental exercise. We have to go and do likewise, as Jesus told the expert in the law to do. Imagine, Jesus actually challenged him to imitate the character and behavior of a Samaritan. Furthermore, for the purpose of practice, Jesus frequently crossed Samaria, traveling between Galilee and Judea with his apostles, giving them ample opportunities to learn to love their neighbors. In this way, loving their neighbors could become more than just a parable to think about. It could become a practice. On one particular occasion, crossing through Samaria, Jesus and his apostles came to the town of Sychar, near a famous water well. As they approached Sychar, Jesus sent them into town to buy food from the Samaritans. And this errand would immerse them among the Samaritans in the center of town, among the stalls in the marketplace, and give the apostles a chance to experience what the Samaritans felt when they came to Jerusalem and immerse themselves in the Jewish crowds. He probably had another purpose too in mind by sending them into town. There was someone he wanted to speak with, and he did not want the presence of the 12 to intimidate her. The spiritual healing this person needed was even more important than teaching the apostles how to change their mentality about the Samaritans. So after sending the apostles on their errand, Jesus walked farther into the countryside to this famous well that had been part of Jewish history for more than 1,000 years, but was now in Samaritan territory. He was tired and thirsty from walking, and the well promised rest and refreshment. He came to the well and sat down, waiting for the person with whom he wanted to speak. She did not know him yet, and had no idea she was about to meet the Messiah that day. She soon arrived alone, carrying her water jar to bear water back to her home. The fact that she came to draw water at this time of the day said something about her. It was noon. Most people came to the well in the early morning or in the evening to avoid the heat of midday. Noon was the time to come to the well to avoid people. She came alone. Women usually went to draw water together to have some time to socialize. Did she have any friends? Was she avoiding people? When she approached the well, Jesus asked her for a drink of water. She was immediately surprised, recognizing by his dress and speech that he was a Jew. She responded, "You are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" She was well aware of the poor relationship the Samaritans had with the Jews and could not believe that Jesus would even speak with her. But Jesus ignored the issue of these prejudices because he didn't share them. He did not come to discuss this topic. He accepted the woman as a soul in need of spiritual healing like so many others. And immediately he focused the conversation on the reason why he had wanted to speak with her. He said, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Living water? Now she was confused. First of all, how could he give her water when he had no bucket to draw water from a well? Secondly, what was living water? Where did it come from? Did he know of a different well that had better water than this historic well that served for countless centuries? Patiently, Jesus explained to her that the water he wished to give her was a different kind of water. Everyone who drinks water from this well outside of Sychar, like any normal water, will only satisfy the body's thirst for a short time, and then they will feel thirsty again. The water that Jesus promised to give her would take away her thirst forever. Not physical thirst, but another, more profound thirst, spiritual thirst. It would be like a spring of water capable of giving eternal life. But she was still confused. Like all of us at one time or another, her mind could only think in terms of physical water from a well like the one she was standing by. So she asked Jesus to give her the water he was describing so that she would no longer have to come to this well. To help her understand how she could enjoy living water for her spirit, he had to reveal his identity as the Messiah. So he told her to bring her husband to join the conversation. Jesus responded, or rather she responded, that she did not have a husband. Jesus gently explained to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have said is quite true." This detail explains something more about her. Her many relationships may have been a symptom of her spiritual emptiness. Just as our bodies need water to live, our spirits need God's presence to live. And just as he created our bodies to feel thirsty when we do not have enough water, he created our spirits with the ability to feel spiritually thirsty or empty when we are living far from his presence. The woman felt spiritually thirsty, but she was, no doubt, trying to satisfy the lack of God's presence with human relationships that could distract her for a while from feeling the symptoms of spiritual thirst, but only for a while. Some people focus on relationships. Others accumulate things. Some seek constant emotional excitement. And still others fall into destructive addictions, trying to fill the emptiness that only God's presence can fill. In fact, the presence of his Spirit sustains the life of our spirits, as water sustains the life of our bodies. This detail about her marital relationships also proved to her that Jesus was not just a simple traveler passing through, but in fact was a prophet, at least. He knew things about her that most people, especially strangers, would never know. She now had reason to believe that she could trust what Jesus said. Before she went to find the man she was living with and bring him to Jesus, she had some questions about God that she'd been wanting to ask someone whom she could trust and who would listen patiently and compassionately to her doubts. But she was still left with the question of what living water is. Maybe the first time we read this conversation, we were not sure what Jesus was referring to either. We can be certain that Jesus spoke more to the woman later about the meaning. For our benefit, the Apostle John explains 3 chapters later what Jesus meant by this language. Living water refers to the Spirit whom those who believed in him were later to receive, John says in John chapter 7, verse 39. Living water represents God's Spirit who begins to live in us when we are born again, making us spiritually alive. God's presence is exactly what the woman needed to quench her spirit's thirst. God's presence in the form of His Spirit living in us. Jesus had left the disciples in town to buy bread so this woman would not be afraid to speak in front of so many people. She was lonely, afraid, and empty, but searching for answers, and Jesus knew this. After Jesus answered her other questions about worship, He revealed to her His identity as Messiah. She was thrilled, but in that moment the disciples rejoined Jesus. They wondered why He was talking to this woman, but did not question Him about it. The woman was so filled with wonder and excitement about her conversation with Jesus that she left her empty water jar by the well and ran into town. With courage deep in her spirit that she had never felt before, she announced to everyone that she had been with the Messiah. She told them why she believed. And then crowds of people left the town to go out and listen to Jesus. Many also came to believe because of what they personally heard from Him. It is interesting to think about what was going on in the minds of the apostles as they considered what was happening before their eyes. These hated Samaritans were becoming enthusiastic believers. They were just as receptive, or even more so, than the Jews in many towns of Galilee and Judea. The entire scene challenged what the 12 had always concluded about the Samaritans, that they were incapable of understanding God or following the truth. Now the Samaritans, whom the apostles had found difficult to love as neighbors, had become their brothers and sisters as followers of Jesus. It would still take time and effort for them to set aside their prejudices, but this was a good beginning. Now let's think about this conversation and the qualities of love that Jesus demonstrated in His treatment of the woman. We want to learn how to love our neighbor as we love ourselves with unconditional love. And certainly we see unconditional love in this conversation because unconditional love means to care for the welfare of another person, especially without expecting anything in return and without thinking about whether the person deserves your care. Jesus had nothing in common with the woman. He was a Jew, she was a Samaritan. He was full and she was empty. The love that He showed by accepting her, speaking with her, and offering her spiritual healing was unconditional. There is respect, too, another quality of love. Respect is to recognize the value of each person and treat him or her with honor and care. The fact that she was a Samaritan and had had so many husbands would have offended many Jews, but Jesus accepted her and valued her soul. He respected her. There's compassion. Compassion means to feel the suffering of another person deeply enough to want to relieve their suffering. How did Jesus practice compassion here? He understood that the woman was really suffering spiritual thirst, and He provided her the possibility of healing. That's compassion. There is the gentleness of love, too. Love is gentle. Gentleness is to treat others with tenderness instead of severity, not wanting to cause harm. She was a fragile spirit, and Jesus did not want to damage her spirit, but instead bring her healing. And just as the Samaritan was gentle with the injured Jew and provided him healing. There is also mercy. Mercy is to relieve another person's suffering without thinking about whether they deserve relief. And again, Jesus practices mercy here in this conversation. The gift of living water provided relief from her spiritual and emotional suffering by filling her with the Father's presence. Jesus' priority was showing her mercy rather than satisfying His own physical thirst. There is also hope. Hope also is a quality of love because it means to be optimistic about people, putting confidence in their abilities. We want to give people hope when we love them. Jesus came to seek and save that which was lost, and the Samaritan woman was lost. And Jesus would never give up hope that she could be found as a child of God and discover new life. There's also goodness. Goodness is to live a beneficial life that brings benefit to others. And actually, the Samaritan woman practices goodness here because she immediately and excitedly shared her new discovery about Jesus and living water with the people from her town with whom she had never had previous contact with. And there is patience. Patience to hold back negative emotions, to tolerate, to wait, not give up. Jesus patiently answered her sincere questions, although they detoured the conversation about living water. And when she did not understand, he did not become frustrated or angry or give up on her. He just kept on speaking. Now, let's go and do the same, as Jesus told the expert in the law. Go and do likewise. Which individuals or groups of people have you formed ideas about without coming to know them very well? And what can you do to lay aside your assumptions about these people and come to know them on a deeper level by showing compassion, kindness, and respect, loving them as your neighbors? May God bless you.